On this day in history, we remember the remarkable individuals who shaped our world. Welcome to Who Died Today in History, where we honor their legacies. From artists to leaders, their impact lives on. If you find their stories meaningful, like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay connected. Roger Moore, the suave English actor best known for portraying James Bond in 7 films from 1973 to 1985, died of cancer on May 23, 2017, at the age of 89. His death occurred in Switzerland, where he had lived for many years, and was confirmed by his children in a heartfelt public statement. It marked the end of an era for fans of classic spy cinema and a generation of viewers who had grown up with his distinctive, witty take on the iconic British secret agent. Moore's passing reflected not only the natural course of aging, but also the shifting cultural values of the 20th and 21st centuries. He belonged to an age of screen heroes who carried a blend of charm, humor, and elegance. Unlike the darker, grittier portrayals of Bond that would come later, Moore's 007 was a reflection of a post-Vietnam, Cold War-weary world seeking sophistication and escapism. His death reminded audiences of the era he helped define, one where entertainment, particularly on the silver screen, offered glamour in the face of global tension and uncertainty. The immediate reaction to Moore's death was a global outpouring of tributes. Former Bond actors, filmmakers, and fans celebrated not only his work on screen, but also his humanitarian legacy. As a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador for over 25 years, Moore used his fame to advocate for children's rights and global welfare, causes he continued to champion long after his retirement from acting. This dual legacy, as both entertainer and humanitarian, elevated his public image beyond Hollywood stardom. His death amplified his legend. While his Bond films were sometimes critiqued for their campiness, they became iconic through Moore's lighthearted yet confident interpretation. His passing sparked renewed appreciation for this approach, contrasting it with the more modern and brooding takes on the character. It also highlighted how each generation redefines its heroes to mirror its own concerns and aesthetics. Roger Moore's memory lives on through film, philanthropy, and storytelling. He is immortalized in the style and swagger of 1970s and 80s pop culture, in the enduring popularity of his Bond movies, and in the countless lives touched by his charitable work. In death, as in life, Moore represented the human desire to blend purpose with panache, leaving behind a legacy of elegance, empathy, and enduring charm. John Nash, the brilliant American mathematician whose life and work reshaped game theory and modern economics, died tragically in a car accident on May 23, 2015, at the age of 86. He and his wife, Alicia, were returning home from Norway, where Nash had just received the prestigious Nobel Prize, one of the highest honors in mathematics. Their taxi driver lost control on the New Jersey Turnpike, and the couple, not wearing seatbelts, were thrown from the vehicle. Both died instantly. The nature of Nash's death, sudden, accidental, and deeply ironic, stands in sharp contrast to the long and arduous life he had lived. His passing underscored the fragility of life, even for those whose intellect seemed almost otherworldly. Nash's career had been marked by extraordinary highs and devastating lows, including his groundbreaking work in non-cooperative game theory and a decades-long battle with schizophrenia. In an age increasingly aware of mental health struggles, Nash's story became a symbol of resilience and recovery. His death came not at the height of his fame, but during a period of renewed recognition and grace, making it all the more poignant. The immediate response to his death was one of widespread mourning, particularly in academic and mental health communities. Colleagues and admirers paid tribute to Nash not only for his intellect, but also for the courage he demonstrated in living with mental illness. His life had already become legendary, notably through the Oscar-winning film A Beautiful Mind, 2001, which introduced millions to the complexities of his genius and struggles. His death served to reaffirm the lasting impact of his life's work and personal journey. Nash's legacy lives on in the countless applications of game theory in economics, international relations, and evolutionary biology. More profoundly, he remains an enduring figure in the public imagination, a reminder of the thin line between brilliance and fragility, and of the humanity behind intellectual greatness. In commemorating figures like Nash, we reveal our deeper fascination with the minds that challenge our understanding of the world, and the fragility that makes their stories universally relatable. Through film, biography, and academic reverence, John Nash is immortalized not just as a mathematician, but as a human story of perseverance, redemption, and quiet triumph. Meara, beloved actress, comedian, and half of the iconic comedy duo Stiller and Meara, passed away of natural causes on May 23, 2015, at the age of 85. Her death marked the quiet end of a vibrant life spent shaping American comedy, television, and stage with intelligence, warmth, and humor. Meara died in Manhattan, surrounded by her family, including her husband and comedic partner Jerry Stiller and their son, actor Ben Stiller. Her passing reflected the values of a generation of performers who came of age in the post-war era and helped define modern American entertainment. Meara and her husband broke into comedy during a time when television was emerging as a dominant cultural force. Their work as a married duo stood out not just for its wit, but for its progressive blending of Jewish and Irish Catholic identities in a still segregated entertainment industry. In this light, her death symbolized the slow fading of an era where comedy served as both relief and cultural commentary during changing social landscapes, from the civil rights movement to women's liberation. The immediate aftermath of her death was one of broad and heartfelt tribute. Fans and colleagues mourned the loss of a woman who was not only funny, but fiercely intelligent, generous, and grounded. She had appeared in numerous television shows, films, and stage productions, and had become a familiar face to generations. But perhaps more importantly, she had modeled a long-lasting partnership in art and marriage, a rarity in show business, anchored in mutual respect and creativity. While her passing did not alter the course of history in a political or global sense, it did invite reflection on the role of comedians as cultural barometers. Meara helped shift the American comedic voice toward one that embraced identity, marriage, and personal vulnerability as material. Her death reminded audiences of comedy's power to reflect the joys and struggles of ordinary life. Meara's memory lives on through the many performances she left behind, but also through the ways we honor comic pioneers, through retrospectives, interviews, biographies, and the ongoing work of the artists she inspired, particularly her family. In commemorating her, we remember that humor is a vital part of the human experience, and that those who bring it into the world deserve a place in our collective memory. Morgan Spurlock, the provocative documentary filmmaker best known for Super Size Me, died of cancer on May 23, 2024, at the age of 53. His death was natural, the result of complications from the disease, and it came as a somber punctuation to a career defined by bold inquiry and cultural critique. Spurlock's passing reflected the tensions of his time, a period marked by growing awareness of personal health, corporate accountability, and the blurred lines between journalism and entertainment. In the early 2000s, Super Size Me ignited widespread conversation about the fast food industry and its impact on American health. Spurlock's immersive, body-on-the-line method, eating only McDonald's food for 30 days, was emblematic of a new wave of documentary storytelling that prioritized personal narrative, spectacle, and confrontation. His approach mirrored an era increasingly disillusioned with institutional trust, seeking truth through individual experience rather than official channels. The immediate response to his death was a mix of mourning and retrospection. For many, it was a moment to reconsider Spurlock's influence on both filmmaking and public health dialogue. While his later years were marred by controversy, including his own admissions of past misconduct during the height of the #Me Too movement, his early work remained a touchstone in the evolution of activist media. His death did not shift historical tides in a grand geopolitical sense, but it did invite renewed evaluation of the role media plays in shaping social consciousness. Spurlock's legacy lies in how he challenged audiences to examine everyday systems: what we eat, how we consume media, who controls information. His death serves as a reflection of humanity's modern struggle with authenticity, accountability, and the complexities of cultural influence. It also underscores the mortality of public figures who, while shaping discourse, remain deeply human, flawed, vulnerable, and ultimately finite. We immortalize figures like Spurlock through continued viewings of their work, academic discussions of their methods, and through the new creators they inspire. His contributions live on in classrooms, on streaming platforms, and in the style of social commentary that blends humor, grit, and urgency. In remembering Spurlock, we engage in the timeless act of examining those who challenge norms, both in life and in legacy, and reckon with the power they hold to inform, provoke, and endure. Mona Freeman, once celebrated as Hollywood's quintessential girl next door of the 1940s and 1950s, died of natural causes on May 23, 2014, at the age of 87. Her passing marked the quiet close of a chapter in cinematic history, one shaped by innocence, glamour, and the post-war ideals of American womanhood. Unlike the dramatic exits of political figures or cultural revolutionaries, Freeman's death was serene, yet it carried symbolic weight, especially within the context of a fading era of classic Hollywood. Freeman rose to fame during a time when the film industry was crafting carefully curated images of young actresses to represent idealized femininity. Her roles, often those of sweet, wholesome girls on the cusp of adulthood, reflected a society yearning for normalcy and tradition in the wake of World War II. As the studio system began to wane in the late 1950s, so too did Freeman's on-screen presence. She eventually turned to painting, retreating from the spotlight and embracing a more private life. Her death was not accompanied by widespread media frenzy, but among classic film enthusiasts, it was a moment of quiet reflection. It symbolized the gradual dimming of an age when movie stars were groomed into cultural icons by studio machinery. Freeman's passing highlighted how the values of her era, modesty, decorum, and traditional beauty, once revered, had become relics in a modern entertainment world driven by raw realism and complexity. Though her death did not shift the trajectory of global events, it offered a lens into how societies memorialize different kinds of fame. Mona Freeman was not a revolutionary or a tragic figure, but her career was a mirror to the dreams and constraints placed on women in mid-century America. In that, her life and death quietly echoed broader themes of transformation in both gender roles and celebrity culture. We immortalize figures like Freeman not through grand monuments, but through the preservation of their art. Her films remain available, capturing the ephemeral charm of a bygone era. Retrospectives, fan communities, and archival platforms continue to honor her work. In remembering Mona Freeman, we confront the gentle passage of time and the shifting standards of cultural memory, where even those who exit quietly leave a mark on how we view the stories of yesterday. Sheldon Reynolds, an American television producer and director, passed away on May 25, 2003 from natural causes at the age of 79. Though his name may not resonate as broadly as those of Hollywood stars or world leaders, Reynolds' influence in shaping the narrative style of mid-20th century television is quietly enduring. His death marked the loss of a creative force whose work reflected the transatlantic cultural exchange and evolving storytelling methods of the post-war era. Reynolds was best known for producing and directing the 1954 television series Sherlock Holmes, starring Ronald Howard. At a time when television was just beginning to assert itself as a dominant cultural medium, Reynolds brought a literary classic to life in a format that made it accessible to millions. His version of Sherlock Holmes was among the earliest attempts to globalize television content, filmed in France and broadcast in both the US and Europe. His passing, while not widely covered in popular media, quietly signaled the end of an era when television producers operated with a level of creative autonomy rarely seen in today's corporate-dominated media landscape. The values of his time, post-war optimism, the valorization of intellect, and an eagerness to bridge cultural divides were embedded in Reynolds' work. His focus on a character like Holmes, with sharp reasoning and moral clarity, mirrored a collective yearning for order and rationality in a world still reeling from the chaos of global conflict. Reynolds' death, then, serves as a reflective pause on the role of media as a stabilizing and educative force during tumultuous decades. While his death didn't spark global mourning, it invites a broader question. How do we remember those who shape our stories from behind the scenes? Artists like Reynolds may not dominate headlines, but their legacies live on through the content they created, stories that continue to be adapted, studied, and enjoyed. In death, Sheldon Reynolds reminds us that influence is not always measured by fame. Through enduring media, we immortalize those who craft the worlds we escape into. His work stands as a quiet monument to television's golden age and to the storytellers who understood that narrative, much like memory itself, is the most enduring form of immortality. Heinrich Himmler, one of the most notorious figures of the Nazi regime, met a violent and ignoble end on May 23, 1945, just weeks after Adolf Hitler's suicide and Germany's surrender in World War II. Attempting to evade capture, Himmler disguised himself and joined a group of fleeing Nazi officials. However, he was recognized and arrested by British forces near Bremervörde. While in custody, Himmler swallowed a hidden cyanide capsule during a medical examination, dying almost instantly. His suicide circumvented the justice that would have awaited him at the Nuremberg trials, denying the world a full accounting of his crimes in court. Himmler's death reflected the chaotic collapse of the Third Reich and the desperation of its leaders in the face of defeat. As head of the SS and architect of the Holocaust, Himmler was responsible for the deaths of millions. His decision to take his own life rather than stand trial mirrors the deep shame and fear many high-ranking Nazis felt once the scope of their atrocities came to light. His death was not marked by honor or loyalty to ideology, but by cowardice and evasion, an end starkly opposed to the rigid discipline and sacrifice he once demanded of others. The immediate consequence of Himmler's death was frustration among the Allied powers. While many Nazis were prosecuted, Himmler's suicide deprived historians and survivors of vital testimony that could have helped illuminate the full machinery of Nazi terror. Still, his legacy as a symbol of calculated bureaucratic evil remains firmly etched into global memory. Himmler's demise amplified the horror of what the Nazi regime stood for, reinforcing his place in history not as a martyr, but as a cautionary tale of unchecked power and moral corruption. Unlike other infamous deaths that evoke a tragic or heroic narrative, his is remembered with revulsion, a necessary reminder of how human systems can be manipulated for inhumane ends. In the decades since, Himmler has been depicted in countless historical accounts, documentaries, and films, always as a figure of darkness. His memory serves not to inspire, but to warn. Through education, remembrance ceremonies, and Holocaust memorials, society continues to confront the shadow he helped cast over the 20th century. His death, like his life, forces us to reckon with the depths of human cruelty and the importance of remembering it, lest it be repeated. Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow, infamous outlaws of the Great Depression, met a violent and sudden death on May 23, 1934. After a 2-year spree of robberies, jailbreaks, and murders, the couple became a symbol of rebellion and notoriety across America. Their story ended in a dramatic ambush on a rural road in Bienville Parish, Louisiana, where law enforcement officers, having tracked their movements with the help of an informant, riddled their car with over 100 bullets, killing them instantly. Their deaths were the climax of a national manhunt and reflected both the desperation of the times and the growing power of federal and state policing. During the Depression, Bonnie and Clyde came to represent a twisted form of folk heroism, idolized by some as modern-day Robin Hoods, though their crimes were far more brutal and self-serving. The public fascination with their rebellious lifestyle, romanticized in newspaper headlines and ballads, highlighted a broader cultural tension, a society struggling with economic despair, moral ambiguity, and the allure of outlaw glamour. The immediate consequences of their deaths were mixed. On one hand, law enforcement received acclaim for bringing down 2 highly dangerous criminals. On the other, the public reaction bordered on mythologizing. Thousands gathered to view their bodies, and gruesome photos of the bullet-ridden cars spread across the nation, cementing their legend. Rather than fading into history as mere criminals, Bonnie and Clyde became enduring cultural figures. Their violent end amplified their legacy in unexpected ways. Decades later, the 1967 film Bonnie and Clyde, starring Faye Dunaway and Warren Beatty, redefined them as tragic anti-heroes and influenced an entire era of cinema. Their story has inspired countless songs, books, and documentaries, each retelling blurring the line between history and legend. In death, Bonnie and Clyde force us to examine humanity's complicated relationship with morality, mortality, and memory. They were not noble, yet they remain memorable. Their story reminds us how society often elevates the infamous, not despite their flaws, but because of them. Through art and pop culture, their memory persists, not as a celebration of violence, but as a reflection of how legends are born in the space between truth and myth, and how we continue to wrestle with the legacy of those who defy the rules. Henrik Ipsen, the towering Norwegian playwright and father of modern drama, died of natural causes on May 23, 1906 in Christiania, now Oslo, Norway, at the age of 78. His final years were marked by illness, following a series of strokes that began in 1900, gradually robbing him of his ability to write and communicate. His death, while quiet and expected, symbolized the closing chapter of a revolutionary voice that had already reshaped the landscape of European literature. Ibsen's death came at the dawn of a new century, a time when the societal structures he had so often critiqued were beginning to evolve. In works like A Doll's House and Ghosts, Ibsen challenged Victorian moral rigidity, gender roles, and religious hypocrisy. His characters often confronted suffocating social conventions, especially women who sought agency in a patriarchal society. His passing did not incite public chaos or political change like that of a monarch or revolutionary, but it marked the end of a literary era that championed the individual's inner truth over societal expectation. The immediate consequences of Ibsen's death were largely felt in intellectual and artistic circles. Tributes poured in from across Europe, acknowledging him as a pioneer who redefined the purpose of theater. No longer was drama simply entertainment. Under Ibsen, it became a medium for societal reflection and psychological depth. His influence would echo in the works of later writers like George Bernard Shaw, Eugene O'Neill, and Arthur Miller, whose plays inherited Ibsen's legacy of moral inquiry and realism. Ibsen's legend was indeed amplified by his passing. In Norway, he became a national icon. His plays, already performed widely during his life, became standard repertoire across the world. Statues were erected in his honor, and his work was enshrined in schools, libraries, and stages globally. His famously cryptic final words, "On the contrary," spoken after a nurse mistakenly said he was doing better, seemed to encapsulate his lifelong defiance of conformity and expectation. In reflecting on Ibsen's death, we are reminded of how mortality confronts even the most transcendent thinkers. Yet through memory and art, figures like Ibsen are not lost. We immortalize them not just through statues and biographies, but by continually engaging with their ideas. In doing so, we keep their spirits active, challenging, questioning, and inspiring new generations to confront the truths of their own time.